That has run through the entire week for us. Very important one about medical aid schemes and allegations of discrimination against Black and Indian medical practitioners. Over to you, Leanne.
Thanks very much, Sakina. We said yesterday that the saga will continue, and it is on the show today. Yesterday, the Council for Medical Aid Schemes announced that they will launch a commission of inquiry into the allegation that medical aid schemes are discriminating against Black and Indian healthcare practitioners. Earlier this week, Morning Live broke a story about a group of Indian and Black healthcare practitioners who claim that medical aid schemes are treating them unfairly and exploiting them due to their race. They also said that medical aid schemes refuse to pay them. So, what happened during the week? The CEO of Discovery joined us on the show, and he came on Tuesday refuting all of these allegations. Then, the next day, the minister came onto the show, the Minister of Health, and he spoke to us about the allegations of racism. So this morning, we are joined in studio by Anthony Pedersen. He is the CEO of Medscheme. Medscheme is one of the medical aid schemes that have been implicated by the group of aggrieved medical practitioners. What we want to do before we start talking to Anthony is just remind you of what the minister said during the interview yesterday.
Well, I'm actually here to announce publicly that no doctor must ever submit confidential information to third parties. Never. That's never done. Even I am not allowed to do so, except under two conditions. If the patient gives you a written consent to disclose their confidential information, yes, you can, through that written consent. Or if you are instructed so by a court of law or a quasi-judicial structure, because we have got to work within the framework of the law. I'll give you an example, Leanne. There are members of parliament who, for political reasons, ask me a question, and you are aware that in terms of parliamentary rules, a minister may not refuse to answer a question. They ask me a question to provide them with the names of the patients who suffered and died from listeria, and give details of that. Obviously, they might have been sent by somebody who has got an interest of that, using parliamentary laws that the minister cannot refuse. But I said, look, when it comes to confidential information of patients, a patient who comes to me in all confidence and give me information, I can't disclose that.
Yes.
And I told them, I'm not going to do that unless members of parliament go to the individual patients and say, you, I want information about you. Please write this written consent so that the minister can give me information. Or alternatively, a court of law has to instruct me to do that. And that's the procedure we're following. So I'm here to say any doctor who has been requested to hand in confidential information to a third party cannot do so. And I regard medical schemes as the third party, except if that third party is part of the treatment protocol of the patients. And a funder cannot be part of the treatment protocol of the patient. Their job is to fund, not to be part of the treatment and the secrets and all that. So that should not be done. No doctor should do that. I think it will be very wrong.
Okay, all right, that was just a snippet of what was said by the minister. So, again, Anthony, we thank you so much for coming in and for your time this morning. Medscheme has been one of the medical aids that has been fingered in this entire allegation and the process. I'm sure you've followed everything that's happened this week. What is your response to the allegations of racism towards Indian and Black medical practitioners?
Thanks, Leanne, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. I must just state up front that Medscheme is part of the largest Black-owned healthcare company in South Africa, and we absolutely do not have any racial profiling in any of the activities that we carry out. It's been said in some of the previous debates that a medical provider has a practice number, and it is the practice number that we use when doing data analytics and in doing other work to identify claims that may appear unusual or as outliers to be investigated. We don't store the race, the gender, or any other profiling information in relation to service providers.
Okay, so that's very similar to what Discovery was saying. They're saying that it's in a system, and the system that works brings out these numbers, and you don't know whether it's black, white, pink. purple, whatever it is, that's how it works. So I'm gathering you're refuting these claims.
Absolutely. I mean, the investigations that we carry out are based largely on two factors that identify outliers. The first is through data analytics, which I mentioned earlier, and the second is largely through whistleblowers. I mean, as an example, in April alone, we had 164 whistleblowers who approached us and said, there's an anomaly, we've seen a claim that's gone through our medical aid where we didn't receive services, as one example. So, as a medical scheme, and Medscheme is an administrator of medical schemes, we have an obligation, and the Act also places an obligation on us to protect the members' interests and to make sure that the members' funds are safeguarded and that we only pay valid claims. So all the work that we do is intended to make sure that only valid claims are paid, and those that are not valid are rejected, or if found to not be valid, having been paid in the past, that those funds are recovered for the benefit of members.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever, as a medical aid scheme, been involved in what the minister called vigilantism? He dubbed this in a way where your scheme specifically has been fingered for doing this, going into doctors' practices with hidden cameras and sending in patients that are not patients, they're just undercover investigators that are going in complaining of diarrhea or vomiting or whatever the case may be, in order to find out what's going on with these doctors and go under your own investigations. Have you ever done anything like that?
No, I mean, we absolutely deny that. That is not a technique that we've ever used. As indicated, we identify claims that require further investigation. Our normal course of intervention is that we write to the medical practitioners asking them to help validate the claims. So if, and in many instances where we've seen a claim that may appear to be an outlier, we're able to validate it with the provider's cooperation. We do go and visit sites, but we always do it when we arrive. We will indicate who we represent and ask to be shown further information to help validate the claims that are paid.
Do you use hidden cameras?
We have never used hidden cameras.
So you've never ever, as Medscheme, gone into a doctor's appointment undercover to investigate a medical practitioner?
We have not done that.
When you talk about practice numbers, and I can understand that because there are a lot of doctors around, a lot of hospitals, pharmacists, whatever the case may be. But there is a list doing the rounds, and a list with names, and particularly the names on this list are black and Indian professionals. What's your response to this list that's doing the rounds?
Well, it is a particular scheme that has, been
GEMS, we can say the name because we've spoken about it here.
Yeah, sure. Perhaps GEMS should be given the opportunity to respond themselves.
I wish they would.
Not,
this is an open invitation, sure, and we want them to come. In fact, I think we have invited them as well. They haven't responded.
What I can say, Leanne, is that we do not have a list. We have, as we sit here this morning, we have 120 practices which are what we term on withhold payment, but that's out of 25,000 practices that we pay every month. So the number of practices that are that we're not paying on an ongoing basis, pending the cooperation of the providers to assist us validating the claims, is less than 1% of, in fact, it's 0.3% of all the providers. And as I've said, we seek to work proactively with those providers to, and we do in many and most instances, where we get the cooperation of the providers and we're able to validate the claims, or in some cases, we do conclude that the claims were not correctly charged or billed. And in those cases, in some instances, the providers refund the money. And where we do find fraud, and in some of the discussion that's taken place, it's been, it's sort of been, the insinuation has been that we do not follow the normal course of justice.
Yes.
And, that is, again, we need to set that record straight. In 2018, we in fact lodged 18 criminal charges against doctors where we did find, proof of fraud. We also have lodged 94 cases in 2018 with the Health Professionals Council of South Africa for them to intervene and rule on a particular set of circumstances.
I want to ask you about, I understand about that, but I think what's at play here as well is the letters of demand that is sent from the medical aid, and I think you're one of them, because I've seen one of the letters doing the rounds with a Medscheme name on, where you are asking for the patient's notes, where you're asking for private information that is between the medical doctor and the patient. Now, the lists, the names, the blood results, all of these kind of things, you're asking the practice to supply this to you. And you heard it here, and the minister saying, that's absolutely illegal. How can you do that? So why are you doing that?
Yeah. Well, again, let me perhaps give some context to that. You know, a member joins a medical scheme, and when doing so, they give consent on the application form for us to have access to medical information that will enable us to pay claims. Doctors, in turn, when they submit a claim to us, at that point, they are disclosing patient information to us. Every claim that we receive comes with an ICD-10 code, which is a diagnostic code. So for every claim that we receive, we are given the clinical information about a patient. We're given the diagnosis. We know exactly which medications have been prescribed because those are funded. We know what procedures have been done because all of that information is on the claim. However, when it's asked that, or stated that we have asked for clinical notes, that would be where we've identified, and let me perhaps give a practical example. If we get a single claim, each claim is looked at on its merits, and the claim may be valid when looked at in isolation. But when we look at the claims in totality for practice, it might be that, as an example, it would appear that a provider has seen more patients than could possibly be seen in the available number of hours in a day. Now, in those instances, we're not asking for practice notes to try and access confidential information. We really are looking for the provider to validate that they in fact did see all of these patients during the course of the day.
So you're not asking for the details. So when you're asking for notes, what are you looking for?
We're looking for evidence to assist us in validating the claim. We already have the clinical information on the claim itself, as I've already said.
But the notes that they give you, I mean, if I'm sitting here and I'm seeing you as a psychiatrist and you're telling me all these kind of things, do you want all those notes? Must I give all those notes to you?
Absolutely not. And we've not asked for that. And in fact, when we do ask for that evidence, you know, we've indicated that they're welcome to redact any information that is confidential. What we're looking for, I've cited one example, but there are others, where we would like to see that the patients in fact did receive services. And I mean, as an example, we get many whistleblowers who contact us and say that they did not receive the services from the provider.
Yeah.
So we approach the provider and we say, you know, please provide evidence that you did see the patient. And in those sort of examples, case notes assist in validating the claim.
So
and perhaps I should say, you know, providers provide a lot of clinical confidential information to us in the normal course of business. When they request a pre-authorization to admit a patient, for example, they provide all the clinical information regarding that case. And it's interesting that it's only when we challenge the billing that the issue of patient confidentiality is then raised.
Well, I mean, I think the problem is that medical aids are under the spotlight right now, and rightfully so. Honestly, I don't think we're trying to brush fraud under the carpet. And I know they go hand in hand, and we know that there's a big issue with fraud happening. But the issue at hand right now is the fact that healthcare practitioners are closing their businesses down because medical aids are not paying them. They are being blacklisted, and that is not allowed. I mean, we heard the minister saying here on air that medical aids do not have the authority to blacklist them. And that's a big problem because a lot of people are doing this, and a group of medical practitioners are naming Medscheme as one of the schemes that are doing this. Doctors are committing suicide. They're in debt. They are owed over R1 million by medical aids. Just one medical aid, not to mention all the others. I mean, these are things where you've got legitimate guys doing a good job, and yet you're destroying their businesses. Now, that, I think, is what is in question here. Do you welcome this commission of inquiry into it?
Very much so. The Act has certain protections for doctors, but so too does it have protections for the members of medical schemes. And, you know, we are quite emphatic that all the interventions that we have in place are lawful and are ethical. And, you know, we have in more than 90% where providers have lodged complaints with the Council for Medical Schemes. The ruling has been in our favour, where we've been found to have acted correctly. Now, we really have no interest in prejudicing any doctor, or certainly not leading to even more serious consequences of our interventions. And you know, we engage with doctors, and we want to resolve these matters. So, you know, where there are any doctors that feel aggrieved or that we've not dealt with them fairly, we welcome engagement to try and reach, you know, to conclude those without having to go into more serious consequences.
Well, I'm sure they will, and I'm sure they have been trying to, and a lot of them complaining that the responses are just not good enough, and that if they don't give you that information, they get blacklisted and they don't get paid. And that's the problem. That is the problem at stake.
You asked if we welcome the investigation that CMS is doing, and we most certainly do, and we're going to support it fully, because I think it will really bring clarity to this matter. We have, as you've heard, the CMS have had a fraud summit. A charter has been put in place. We welcome that, because that will then enable us to have defined a framework within which to work, and which has been agreed by all the parties. And you know, further clarity on Section 59 of the Act, which has been cited in almost all of these discussions.
Absolutely.
You know, we really would welcome that clarity, because we feel that we have at all times worked within the Act and in those sections of the Act. Obviously, the doctors feel otherwise, so I think that this investigation will clarify that.
Good. I'm glad. I'm happy to hear that. Anthony Pedersen, again, thank you for coming in. The CEO of Medscheme, one of the medical aid schemes implicated by a group of aggrieved medical practitioners. We take a break, and then we